Okay. Can y'all hear me? I don't know if you can hear me very good or not. I want to tell you the true story of the death house that we lived in. Now, I started puberty. Well, I started growing boobs. I started my period when I was around 10 years old. And we still lived in that trailer house out there at High Chaparral Ranchettes, there near Leander. And it was around that time my dad met my second stepmom, Jean, the one that wasn't very nice. And well, Dad had bought 6 acres of land 9 miles out of Leander, northwest of Leander, 9 miles out there, in a new community that had just been put in out there. Everywhere still had dirt caliche roads. And there was just a handful of other families that lived there at that time. Well, now there's hundreds, but back then there was just a handful. And Dad bought 6 acres of land, and that 6 acres was inside of a loop, and a road, one of the main roads, went around that loop like that. So every day there was lots of cars going back and forth around the loop around our property. But anyway, he bought that and had our trailer house moved out there and put on there. And we lived out there like that for a while. And him and Jean was still dating. And well, when I turned, how old was I? I was about 12. When I turned 12, which would have been about 1971, my dad's mother, Granny Freeman, died. Well, she lived in a small house over here in Imperial, Texas. And she was widowed, and so she had lived by herself for many years. She died. Because my step-grandpa had died of cancer many years ago. And she was reclusive. And she lived by herself, and she never went anywhere to visit anybody. She wouldn't let anybody in her house. I mean, sometimes she acted like she didn't want to let us in her house. I mean, we went to visit her a couple of times. And that was when we lived in Leander. We drove all the way out here to West Texas to visit kinfolks. And we'd go by, of course, Dad wanted to see his mom. We'd go by her house, and she wouldn't answer the door. We'd knock and say, "Hi, Granny, it's us." Or Dad would say, "It's me, Mother, it's me." And she'd peek out. You could see her peek out through the curtains, and she'd have dark sunglasses on. She'd peek out. And man, that was creepy. And sometimes she wouldn't open the door. And then sometimes we'd stand out there and wait for several minutes, and then finally she'd open the door and say, "Come in." And of course, like most reclusive people, she was a hoarder, and she had stuff stacked up all over the place in that house. But anyway, she had died alone in that house. And she had been dead, they estimated about 3 months, they said, before her body was found. And she once a month, she would go to the post office to get her Social Security check and to pay her water bill and her electric bills. Well, for 3 months, she didn't show up to get her check or nothing. Nobody saw her, nothing. So the town sheriff went over to her house and knocked. She wouldn't come to the door. The door was locked. And he walked around the house, as somebody would do, and found one window cracked open. And he said he went up to that window to peek in, and he could smell the rotted body. Well, of course, they went in. Of course, they had to go in and take her body out. And they had to shovel her body into a body bag, and they didn't bother, that's just how they had to do it. It was rotted. Well, my dad inherited that house. And I remember I was 12 years old, and me, Dad, my brothers drove all the way over there to Imperial to clear out boxes and boxes. We just carried out boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff out of the house and put it out in the front yard. And it stunk so bad, I'm telling you, it stunk so bad. He shouldn't have expected us to go in there and smell that stench. It was awful. We'd hold our breath and go in there and hold our breath as long as we could. Oh my God, it stunk so bad. And that night, at my other granny's house, we spent the night at Granny Mac's house. And we ate supper. She fixed fried chicken, and we ate supper, and then just a little bit after supper, I got plumb sick, and I just puked my guts out. And it was from breathing that dead body rot. Oh, it was awful. She told my dad, she said, you should not have took them kids into that house. What was done was done. I don't know what was done with all that stuff. It had all that, everything had that stink in it. You know it did. I don't think you could get that stink out of anything. I mean, you might as well just take that stuff out somewhere and burn it. I mean, who would want it? But anyway, her water had been cut off, and her electric had been cut off, and she had lived in there for who knows how long, with her water and her electric cut off. And there was, it's crazy, I'm telling you. She had put empty jars all in the bathtub. Because the house was so full of junk, she had nowhere else to put them. She put empty jars. She saved empty jars, put them in the bathtub. And then she even put them in the toilet bowl. I'm not kidding you. She put them in the toilet bowl, empty jars. And there was a pile of human poop in the hallway. I guess that was her last poop. I guess she starved to death because she wasn't going to the grocery store. Anyway, my brothers told me that when they had gone in that bedroom to gather stuff, take stuff out of that bedroom where she had died, that they found a shoe that had part of her rotted foot in it. And maybe it had gone under the bed, you know. Anyway, they took it out in the front yard and dug a hole with a shovel and buried it. But ain't that disgusting? Oh my God. Oh my God. I tell you what, for years and years after that, I had nightmares. I had nightmares, awful nightmares about it. But anyway, Dad, being a tightwad like he was frugal, and he was a tightwad. That house was so nasty it needed to be burnt down. It had that stink in it so bad. But Dad wanted it because it was free. He had that house moved 300 miles from Imperial, Texas. Let's see. It would have been further. It would have been further than 300 miles. We'll say 330 miles or so from Imperial all the way to Leander. and had it set up on cinder blocks on that land out there that he had bought. And he sold that little trailer house to some friends of ours. And so we had to move into that house. Oh my God, it stunk so bad. We had to live in it. And you could open up a closet door or pull out a drawer in the kitchen or open up a cabinet door, and it just stench was just concentrated in there. Just, oh. And whenever it would rain, the moisture in the air would bring that stink out. It just awful. It's ungodly. We had to live there. For years, you could still smell that stink. Especially after it rained, you could smell it. And in the front bedroom that Dad used that front bedroom for his bedroom, there's a black stain on the floor where her body laid, rotted into the wooden floor. He slept in there. I'm glad he didn't expect me to. I didn't want to sleep in there with that ungodly stench. It got that body rot in the floor. That house had been probably built in the 1940s. It was a small 2-bedroom house, 1 bath in between, a little bitty bathroom in between. Dad built he added on to the living room, built a big addition on the front part of the living room. And he got a wood stove, and he put some rocks up to go right behind it and under it and around it. Made a fireplace like that. So we had a wood burning stove, but for a long time we used a propane stove. But that house was always cold. It wasn't insulated. It was always cold. It was up off the ground on them cinder blocks. There was never any underpinning around the bottom of the house. So the cold air in the wintertime was just right up underneath the floorboards. That's where we lived. But Dad married my stepmom. When we got that house, that's when him and Jean got married, and she moved in with us. And she had a son, Wesley. Wesley was around my age. He was mildly retarded. He was good-hearted. He was a good-hearted guy. I don't know how he turned out to be so nice and good-hearted. And being raised up by her, but of course she loved him and she treated him good, you know. But we weren't her kids, so she didn't treat us good. She's the one that got rid of all my toys, my dolls, my comic book collection. That's where we lived. Dad and Jean got divorced. They didn't stay together real long. They didn't stay together real long, maybe 2 years tops, I think. They didn't stay together real long. But during the time they was married, every now and then in the summertime, we'd go swimming at a place called the Blue Hole. And anybody that knows the Liberty Hill area, has ever been there, they know what I'm talking about, the Blue Hole. It was a dangerous place to swim. But it was popular, and a lot of people would swim there. A man drowned there one time while we was there. I remember that somebody pulled his body out and he was laying there, dead on the hammer. It's terrible. And we would go camping down on Lake Travis. I never did like camping. I hated camping, but we all had to go. Dad and Jean and the boys, they all liked it all right, but I didn't. And we'd do a little fishing now and then. And yeah, and see, I had you know, gone into puberty. Of course, then I was in junior high by then, 6th grade. And I had gone from being a carefree, goofy kid to being a real self-conscious, real super shy girl. And I never liked Leander. I never liked the Central Texas area that much because the people there weren't nearly as friendly as they were and still are in New Mexico and West Texas. They're just not the same. And it's because of the way the people were, I didn't like it. I just never did like living there. But anyway, when I was 20 years young, I barely knew how to drive. I went to Austin and got a job as carpenter's helper. And I saved up some money and hired this woman to teach me how to drive. Because Dad never would bother to teach me how to drive. He always tried to teach me how to drive a standard shift, and I didn't understand what the dynamics of it, so I couldn't catch on to it. Nobody ever bothered or cared enough about me to teach me how to drive and take the time to do it and use a automatic shift transmission. So I had to hire somebody and save up money and hire a woman to teach me to drive. And I barely knew how to drive, just enough to barely pass my driving test. And when I got my driver's license when I was 20 or 21, then Dad bought me he paid $300 for me a 1972, 1972, I think it was, Chevy Nova. They had manual steering and manual brakes. I liked that car. And I drove that for quite a while now. It helped me a lot to get around, work and stuff, all that. Well, when I was still working for that company, I hurt my back lifting something that was real heavy. Now, I had scoliosis to start with. I didn't even know it. But I lifted something that was real heavy, and I felt all my vertebrae shift. I felt them shift out of place. Moved from the back of my skull all the way down. All the way down, I felt my vertebrae shift. And I was screwed after that. I had to quit that job, of course. And then I would have to go to the chiropractor for visits to have my back adjusted. But as time went by, those adjustments got to where it hurt worse and worse. Every time I'd get my back adjusted, it would hurt worse and worse. But finally, the last time I went, it hurt so bad, I just couldn't stand it anymore. I was in tears. And on the way home, I prayed. I said, God, you're just going to have to help me with my back because I can't do this no more. So, I guess you did. You just helped me because I've continued on to this day. From the age of 21 to 60, I've continued on. I had to do a lot of house cleaning jobs. And I've done house painting jobs, things like that for work. I just never did like living there in Central Texas. I never did. I just never did like it, and I never did find a niche to fit in. And we lived way out there in the country, and there was ranchettes, and it was a long ways to drive into Austin. If you was going to get a job, you'd have to get a job there in Austin somewhere. You'd have to drive a long ways. Leander didn't have nothing for jobs. It was just a little bitty town at that time. Oh, it's all grown up now. You wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe it. It's unreal. It's unreal how it's all grown up out there. Oh my God, houses, suburbs, new schools, malls, and stores, and restaurants. Just out the game all over the place, man. They got a toll road that goes all the way past Leander now. I mean, it's just crazy. I don't like to go there at all anymore. I moved here to West Texas to live permanently when I was about 42, I think. I think I was 42, something like that. I come out here and live permanently. And I had to, of course, I had to go to work, get jobs. I worked as motel maids, and a dishwasher in restaurants. That's about all I was qualified for. All I knew how to do. Work myself to death. And it was getting to the point where I couldn't hardly work at all. I couldn't work full time anymore. And I asked them to let me work part time. I said no. And I inquired at places all around town if I could get hired on part time. No, they want somebody full time. Well, see, my back was bothering me, and I was so exhausted all the time. Just exhausted all the time. I was getting where I couldn't hold up to it anymore. And by then I was 49 years old. Well, that's about the time I met my husband. Thank God I met my husband when I did. Because I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I couldn't hold up to working full-time anymore. I couldn't. And them motel jobs and these restaurant jobs, they work you into the ground. They work you into the ground. So, then my husband came along when I was 49. Thank God. And we was together for about a year when we got married. So, this December will be I think our 10th anniversary. Wedding anniversary, I think. Or 11th, I think. It's 10th, it might be. I don't know. I'll have to look on I've got a marriage certificate hanging on the wall. I'll have to look at it. But anyway, here we are in West Texas. This is where I've always wanted to live all my life. I never really wanted to leave West Texas. But here I'm spending my senior years out here. Thank God. But I just wanted to tell y'all about that, the true story of the death house that we lived in. So that's it, y'all, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.